You see, the concept of God in Semitic religions is already they make God into a person who's totally good, totally omniscient, omnipresent, and compassionate, good, everything. So then where does evil come from? They cannot hide that, from the fact that evil exists. So where does it come from? So then they have to create a devil on whose forehead everything that is evil goes into. So you see, the world is a world of duality, that if God is all-powerful, omnipotent, then both come from him. You cannot create a devil, because the moment you create a devil, again, God and devil are opposites, they're dualities.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Szabo.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Savannah Podcast. I am absolutely thrilled to introduce today's show, not only because of the episode itself, but because it represents our 100th episode of the podcast. Had you told me when we started off this venture that we would be in less than a year a top 10 podcast, and that I would be able to meet and experience some of the amazing people and teachers that I've been able to talk to and share on the podcast, I don't know that I would have believed you. But here we are, coming up on our year anniversary, our 100th episode. It's pretty amazing and exciting. And really, we have you, the listeners, to thank. We've got our amazing guests to thank, but truly without you guys listening to what they have to say and what I have to say, we wouldn't be where we are today. So thank you all so much for listening. And remember, as a thank you for your listens, you can enter in each and every single week to the weekly contest over at SavannahSpirit.com/contest and enter in the information. You can enter in every single week. And it's pretty exciting because you can win a $100 gift card as well as our thank you for listening to the podcast. Now, today's show is all about the laws of karma and reincarnation. Our guest today is Vanamali Mataji. She's the founder of the Vanamali Gita Yoga Ashram in Rishikesh, India, where she lives, gives regular talks, puja, and meditation sessions, and she's also the author of over 8 books, all of which I recommend, and they're all amazing. If you want to hear more about Vanamali's story, I actually encourage you to go listen to episode 91 of the Savannah Podcast. But today we're going to dive straight into the conversation. Mataji, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's really nice having you back again, and I appreciate you taking the time, especially given the volatility of electricity and things like that and the power sometimes in Rishikesh. So I'm really happy to have you here and be able to talk to you from the other side of the world.
Yeah, I'm happy too.
So today we're going to talk about the laws of karma. We're going to talk about reincarnation. I wanted to start as sort of a base floor, especially for the Western audiences. Now, one of the things that I notice a lot is that people take kind of the Judeo-Christian sense of a god and they apply it to karma in the sense that they view karma as like a galactic, impersonal judgment system, just like the Judeo-Christian representation of the God who's there saying, well, this is a sin and that's not. So they often think that karma means that, well, if you do something good, then good will happen. If you do something bad, bad will happen to you. And it's that cut and dry. What do you feel that that's an accurate representation, or is that kind of misunderstanding what karma is all about?
No, it's karma has been. We are here today. We are going to take the law of karma, which is totally a natural law. In fact, it comes. The natural law of physics is the third law of motion, Newton's third law of motion. That is, every action has its equal and opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. So that here, when it comes to the actions of a human being, it's not just the physical action that counts, but also the motivation. So that Hinduism insists that all of us are totally responsible for our own lives. Because as we act, so we become. Because every action that we do is a cause which has to produce an effect. And that effect has to come to you alone. And if that does not come in this lifetime, then comes the law. It goes together. The law of reincarnation. You have to have a body in order to enjoy or be punished for that effect, and therefore you have to take on another body. So this is very, very simply. This is a very highly scientific law, and Westerners should understand this. It has nothing to do with God at all. And we just cannot blame anybody. We are very inclined to blame some God or some other circumstances, or our mother, of course, a favorite person to blame. But actually speaking, none of these things can be blamed. We are totally to be blamed and to be praised if something good happens or something bad happens. This is the law of karma and reincarnation in a nutshell.
Well, and one of the ways that I've heard kind of explained, in essence, what you're saying is that the contrast between, taking a scenario where someone's at the side of a street corner and they walk into a street and they get hit by a car. Well, the misconception would be, well, they must have done something really bad earlier in their life, and that's why they got hit by a car. But what I'm hearing you saying, and my understanding is more, it's not about good or bad, but rather saying, hey, you stepped into the street. No one else made you step into the street. It happened because of your actions, because of the very things that led you up there. It's not so much of a moralizing of the situation, but rather a complete accountability for our actions.
Exactly. We are totally responsible for our actions, and therefore totally responsible for our lives, because our lives are built on our past actions. If I eat bad food today, I should have a upset stomach tomorrow. And sometimes it doesn't happen like that. We keep on eating bad food for years, and then we get a heart attack at the age of, say, 50 or 60. So it's not because of the food you ate yesterday, but because of the combination and so on, which you have been having all through your life. So it doesn't always happen immediately, but it happens because of something you did in your previous life, or in this very life, at some previous time.
Well, let's talk about reincarnation then a little bit in previous lives, because that's something that, for myself, I think there's a growing number of Westerners, especially because of exposure to Eastern ideas that believe in the concept of reincarnation. It's one that I've gone back and forth with many times in my life. I have a hard time rationally thinking about it, but at the same time, I've had experiences before that I absolutely cannot explain. There was one in particular in Thailand a number of years ago. I was doing these meditative practices with a friend of mine. We both separately had very similar experiences during this of a past life together. And this wasn't part of our plan it has nothing to do with the practice that we were doing or anything else. But when we were finished with the practice, we both shared our experience, and it was the same experience. And again, there's nothing rationally I could explain with it, but it was a very real felt sense that not only had we had an experience in a past life together, but we remembered the same experience in our own inner worlds. So I'm fascinated by the idea of it, and would just love to hear you talk a little bit more about the ideas behind reincarnation.
It's exactly this. It's totally connected with the law of karma. The law of karma, as I said, says this much, that every action has to have its equal and opposite reaction. It's a scientific law. So when it is applied to the human being, it's not just his physical action that counts, but his mental action, that is his attitude or motivation. For instance, a violent action, say a robber comes along and sees a woman wearing a diamond bracelet, and he cuts off her arm to steal the bracelet. Now, another person, a surgeon, cuts off an arm of a person because the arm is gangrenous due to some reason or other. Now, both are equally the same action, same violent action, but in one case, that action binds him to some further, he has to be punished in some way or other in future. In the other case of the surgeon, he has to be remunerated in some way or other in some future time. So in the human being, it's not just the action alone that matters, but the attitude or motivation behind it.
So intention is a really big part of it then.
Yes, intention, definitely. The human being is definitely intention because, as I said, the action itself is innocent. It's the intention with which you do it that makes it ricochet back on you and makes you, have a good or bad effect for that. Because you have, in effect, everything you are doing is a cause which has to have an effect. Nature doesn't like anything left untied. She likes, everything to be cleanly. And if this man does not live to enjoy or be punished for his the cause which he has done or created, then he has to take another body in order to be punished or to be blessed with or enjoy whatever it is. Because the law of karma, everybody thinks is a very bad thing, but it's not. If you do good things, obviously you get the benefit of that as well.
So one of my big questions when it comes to reincarnation is that you hear a lot of people, or I hear a lot of people that will say things like, "Oh, well, I'm the reincarnation of Cleopatra," or it seems like everyone's the reincarnation of some famous figure in the past. And I always get this big resistance whenever I hear that sort of stuff. It's like, oh, everyone was really famous and powerful. No one was like a simple farmer. But my biggest challenge truly is that when I'm in a altered state of consciousness or an expanded state of consciousness, and I feel the oneness of it all, and I feel like there's a deep understanding of whether someone calls it the Atman or Brahma or Shiva, whatever it may be, that sort of connected, all-pervasive beingness. Then my problem is that, okay, well, if we are that, if what I'm looking at in my body and thinking of as my mind is simply a misunderstanding, it's Maya, then what is it that actually reincarnates? Because I feel like, well, if when we shed our body, if we go back to oneness, what is it that actually reincarnates? Because if we're all one, weren't we all Cleopatra? Weren't we all of these figures in the past? What's the essence that's actually reincarnating?
It's a subtle body. We have a causal body, what we call a causal body. We have actually 4 sheets actually in us. There are different sheets or bodies inside. And the subtle body is made out of the mind, intellect, and the ego system, which is what prompts you to take another body, because we have all our desires unfulfilled, or those effects which we have to be enjoyed or we have to be punished for. All these happen in our mind, intellect, ego system. That is a causal body. It causes us to take another body. Where would these go? Because these desires are unfulfilled, and nature doesn't like any unfulfilled desires. She will see to it that you get what you desire. So you have to be very, very careful as to what you desire or what you even pray for. Because as you wish, so you shall be given. We have very funny stories about that.
Would do you want? You're such a wonderful storyteller. The moment you said, "Well, we have wonderful stories about it," I'm like, "Ooh, tell us a story." Would you tell us one of those stories?
Well, this man was sitting under a tree or something like that, and he said, he had got a genie or someone who would give him all his wishes. And so he said, I wish, I would have lots of mangoes. And then, of course, the mangoes fell on him. And then I wish I had a cot to sleep in. And then he slept. He had a lovely sort of, he was sleeping under the tree. And then he said, I wish and I hope that there won't be any tiger around here. It's a forest. And immediately a tiger came and pounced on him, of course. Because
so it's the thought vibration of the thing.
Yeah. So, things like that, they're very funny stories. So, it's a double-edged weapon, our desires, We think to fulfill our desires is something great. But, that is what keeps on, links. It causes a link to that chain of karma. And as I said, the law, it's such a obvious law. How do you account? How does a Semitic religions account for the discrepancy you see in the world? One person is born a leper, another person is born, able-bodied and beautiful. Someone is ugly, has a humpback, and one is very rich, and one is very poor. One has no eyesight. How do you account for all these things? It can't be a just and compassionate God who hurls one child of his into a leper colony and another into a palace. Surely not. The only way to account for it is to say that your own actions, you've created your life out of your own actions and your own intentions.
So what do we do then, living in the moment, living here in the now? Because I'll also hear sometimes people say, well, I've got this, like, I have this pain in my side, and I think it's because I was stabbed there in a previous life, and I'm holding on to this energy and stuff. And I hear it used in such a way that it kind of victimizes people, or they victimize themselves to say, I can't do anything about this. It happened in a past life. So how can we take this understanding, both of the law of karma and reincarnation, and utilize it in our lives for a force of positive change? So it's not just something that we're saying, well, this happened to me in a past life, and so now I'm stuck with this now. Because to me, that doesn't seem to really hit the point.
Yeah, well, actually, there are three aspects to this karma. That is prarabdha karma, and sanchita karma, and agami karma. That is, prarabdha karma is something you can't do anything about. It's because of which you are born in this body, into this family, into this country, with the features you have, with the aptitude you have, and the company you keep. Everything has because of your prarabdha karma, over which you have no control whatsoever. That's obvious. But what is running, your karma which is running now, is called the sanchita karma. That, to a certain extent, mind you, not to a complete extent, because obviously we are conditioned by so many things from the time we were born. We are not really free agents as we like to believe that we are. We are conditioned, totally conditioned by so many things that the books we read, the family we were born into, religion we practice, so many things. But there is a possibility. There is every possibility that somebody might come, or you might read a book, or you might, see a film which completely changes you into a new path. That much of probability is there in this sanchita karma. Finally, is the agami karma, which of course that's the future, and to about 50% is definitely in your hands. And to explain this, the Puranas give a beautiful. A beautiful simile. A man has, a quiver, and he has got 3 arrows. One arrow he has already shot. That is a part of the karma. He can't recall that. It's already there. I said, that is why you've been born into that country with that features, etc., and so on and so forth. Now, the second arrow is already fixed on the bow. His direction is fixed. But there is every possibility and every chance that he might change his direction at some point or other. There is a chance that he can do that. There is a possibility. And the third one, which is still in the quiver, that is entirely in his hands. And he can, as I said, about quite a good percentage of a chance that he can use it as he wills.
Well, so if we're listening to or thinking about this in the same way of like a law of nature, that a law of physics, that something is going to create this other action, and then we're saying, okay, well, past life karma will affect us now. My mind goes to the thought of, well, where is free choice then? Because if you're talking about the karma that you can affect in the moment, but if each action has a specific reaction that will happen, and I'm working off karma from a previous life, things that have already happened, it would go on to assume that I'm reading this book because all of the previous experiences of my life, all my karmas led me up to read this book or to make this action. So where does free will work itself into this idea of how it actually works, that you could change the direction of where you're going to shoot your next arrow?
Because free will is a myth which human beings have created for themselves. In this circumstances that we are in now, our will is, as I told you, it's conditioned from the moment you are born. You can just think of it. It is conditioned. totally conditioned from the moment everything has been decided for you. But there is a possibility that something can happen, and something, just a look, a glance, a book, or something could happen. That possibility is there in this present life, and as I said, that will change your future totally. So that sometimes you are probably brought up in a conservative Christian family. How is it that you change? Something must have made you change that at some point in your life. So that, of course, it is a fact that there is something in your previous life which has led you to this. But there is a very small percentage of what we think of as free will, that I'm free to do as I want, is a myth. Which the freedom we have is the length of the chain of a dog which is tied to a pole. I'm sorry, but that is nobody likes to admit it, but this is the truth.
And so is the freeing of that chain not so much an aspect of your own karma, but then an aspect of anugraha? Is that grace then at this point, of the moments where there can be a shift? Is that grace coming in, or is that?
Grace is a thing which all Christians ask me about, but in Hinduism, grace is not something which is given when it is undeserved. Usually, when Christians ask this question, it means that somebody got God's grace and when he didn't deserve it. And that makes God's a person who is apt to, has favoritism, which I think is very unfair. We don't believe in it. Grace will definitely come, but the person has to deserve it. He has to, when he practices yoga, he practices so many sadhanas and so on and so forth. And there's a burning desire in him for liberation. Definitely grace will come, definitely. But there has to be something within you to start that off. Grace doesn't just come like manna from heaven, that would make God into someone who shows favoritism. Don't you realize that?
Well, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm a little confused because I'm hearing you have to kind of do something to get it, which I agree. But then saying, well, it's not showing favoritism. One of the things that I appreciate so much within Hindu and Indian stories is that the people like Ravana, all these characters who in the perhaps the Western sense are the bad guys, they still can get the boons from Brahma, from Shiva, from Kali. Like, as long as they're doing the work, if they've done the yogic practices, they can still get the boons. So the differences between more so the quote unquote good guys and bad guys is more about selflessness and ego than it is anything else at that point. Can you talk a little bit about that and how what we could call grace and what we say are these boons or even the siddhis that come regardless of whether or not someone is a good person? I mean, we can take the case of Ravana where he's always thinking for himself. What can he get for himself? Ooh, there's Sita. I want her for myself. But then again, of course, he was considered a good king to his people. So can you talk a little bit about how that works out?
Yeah. This comes to the concept of God in Semitic religions and in Hinduism. You see, the concept of God in Semitic religions is already they make God into a person who is totally good, totally omniscient, omnipresent, and compassionate, good, everything. So then where does evil come from? They cannot hide from the fact that evil exists. So where does it come from? So then they have to create a devil on whose forehead everything that is evil goes into. So you see, the world is a world of duality, good and evil, wicked and good, and sorrow and happiness and joy, and so on. This you just cannot deny it. And we say, Hinduism says that if God is all-powerful, omnipotent, then both come from him. You cannot create a devil, because the moment you create a devil, again, God and devil are opposites, they're dualities. So then everything comes from him. And even in Puranic literature, you will find the Devas are the gods and the Asuras are the demons. Both are born from the same father. They have different mothers, but same father. You see how it is. Because they are all come under the realm of duality. What we are asked to do is go beyond duality to that transcendental state of Brahman in which nothing of this exists. That's the only way you can gain true freedom. Now, that comes back to this, the freedom point also. It's only in that state where there is true freedom. The moment we come into duality, we are bound. We are bound by the different types of things we think. We are forced to think, and we are made to think, and so on. This goes on forever. So that's what liberation means, to go away from duality. So here, as I said, this whole thing comes from the fact that the concept of God is basically not right in all Semitic religions, because they believe in a God which is, exclusive God, and exclusive to the people who believe in Him alone. Whereas the Hindu Brahman, the concept of Brahman, is an all-inclusive entity. You can't even say entity, energy, or force, which is available to all people at all times, in all space, and is certainly not exclusive. It can never be. How can it be exclusive? Because the moment you say it's exclusive, then that's why the fundamentalist problems come up.
So how does one who's living in the world of duality then, and taking into account this law of karma, how does one make choices in life if we're looking to move beyond duality, beyond concepts of right or wrong, but also our actions are so, in very many ways, predetermined by our past karmas? What is one to do in each moment in terms of the choices that we make?
The choices obviously have to come from our level of consciousness. There's no other way. We can't run to look at a book or call up our guru and ask all this. The choice obviously has to come from that level of consciousness. So our duty is to try and raise our level of consciousness by all these different types of yogas and so on, which are prescribed, by which we will slowly, heighten your level of consciousness. For instance, we can't give a general rule of conduct for every human being. It's just not possible. Each one has to act from his own level of consciousness. So the only way is to try to raise that level up. And for that you will get grace. The moment you decide that I want to better myself, I want to attain freedom, I want to get away from this trammels of this, dualistic life, at that moment you've made a tremendous leap forward in your evolution. At that time, that grace helpful, the whole of nature will support a person who has made the right decision.
So I'm still trying to clarify this so much in my mind of if free will is an illusion, who makes that choice to then do that? Is that choice then predetermined by your past karmas alone? Or, if someone was, just for the sake of the conversation, had done something horrible in their past life that would set them up in this life to have to live with the consequences of that, what determines then that capacity to make the choice to really make the change of self-betterment and towards self-realization?
But if a person who is, acts in an asuric fashion, a demonic fashion, then such a person will, naturally his choice will be a demonic also. But that there will be an end to it's said that, a demonic character, he will be hurtled down to the very depths of hell, let's say. I mean, not real hell in his own mind, in his own life here. Because according to the Krishna, hell and heaven are right here. It should be here. He never tells us that you will gain heaven after death or anything like that. Again and again, what the Gita says is, if there is a heaven, you have to find it here, and that you can and will find it, provided you so many yogas which he prescribes and which many of us know. So that demonic strength of his very force of that, remember that demonic force also comes from him. It does not come from a devil. That force which prompts the demon to jump at your throat is the same force which makes you defend yourself against him. That is the strangest part. If you want stories, I can tell you a beautiful story about this.
Oh, always. Yes, please.
Okay. Now, I don't know whether you've heard about there's Asura called Hiranyakashipu.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of those mighty titans who drove the gods out of the heaven and usurped heavens and all. He was conqueror of the three worlds. But he had a son called Prahlada, who was a great devotee of Vishnu. So try as he might, he could never change the boy's mental makeup. Every time he asked him, what is that you have learned in school today? The boy would say, I have learned that Narayana is the greatest. So the father was so furious with him. He tried in many ways to kill him, poison him, or throw him into a well, and so on. And of course, Prahlada was totally unperturbed at any of the things his father tried to do. And he just said, Narayana, Narayana. And so he was saved, of course. So then at last, one day, the teachers tied him up to a pillar. The father told him, tie him up. He can't be allowed to, change the minds of the boys also. So they tied him up to a pillar and all of them left him. And then Prahlada started chanting Narayana at the top of his voice. So the king was so furious, he ran to him from the palace with his sword upraised. And the boy looked fearlessly up at him. And so Hiranyakashipu asked him, what is the power behind you, he said, that makes you become so fearless? To me, I'm the rule of the three worlds. What is that power behind you? And Prahlada answered, the same power that makes you hold up your sword, O father, is the power which gives me the courage to face up to you. So one of the most beautiful stories about that, you see. Mm-hmm. So then he said, Hiranyakashipu said, then tell me where that power is. So Prahlada said, it is everywhere. It's in me, in you, in everywhere in this room. So then the king asks, he points to a pillar and says, is it in this pillar? So the boy answers, what pillar? Because by that time he was in a totally state of unity consciousness, and he didn't see a pillar. He only saw that form or that energy or that light everywhere, you see. So he says, what pillar? And then, of course, Hiranyakashipu saw the pillar, and so he bangs it down, he cuts it down, and out jumps the fourth incarnation of Vishnu, known as Narasimha, half man, half lion. Because Hiranyakashipu had got many boons from Brahma, that he would not be killed by a man, he couldn't be killed by a human, animal, he couldn't be killed by with weapons, he couldn't be killed in the night, he couldn't be killed in the day, he couldn't be killed outside, he couldn't be killed inside. So he had taken on the form of this man-lion in order to protect his devotee. And he put him on his lap so that he was neither on the ground or anywhere else. And he sat on the threshold in a room so that he was neither out nor in. And he killed him with his claws, so that without any weapons. But that is not relevant to our things. What I said about the story is to show you how the boy says, the truth. That is the truth. The power which makes the assassin kill you is the same power which makes you look at him without fear. That same power. There's no other power. There's no other force. There's only one force. That's something which is such an important part of Hinduism and such a beautiful part of Hinduism. There's nothing except that for evil or for good. Where else can it come from?
Well, and I love that story as well. Actually, I shared that story. It's in episode 49 of the Savannah podcast as well, because I really appreciate and love that story. So it's nice hearing you tell it as well. So with our understanding then of the law of karma and how reincarnation works, what is I know you're obviously a big fan of the Gita. Fan's not the right word, but what specifically is the Gita telling us about this?
Nothing specific except that how to get out of this law. The only way to get out of this law is because, you see, every cause has an effect. That is the law, that every cause has to have an effect. And how the Gita tells us to get out of it is that by our desire for an effect is what binds us. So do not expect any effects to come from your action, because that is not in your hands in any case. You're right. You have been given a right by the universe to do your duty. We've been given only one right, and that is to do your duty. You have not been given the right to ask for what you will get out of that. And even if you do ask for it, it may not come, because that is governed by a separate law. It's governed by cosmic law over which you have no control. So all you can do is do your duty at the moment to the best of your ability. That's all God asks of you. And leave the rest to Him. If you do that, you are no longer under the law of karma. That is called karma yoga. That is how he changes the law of karma into karma yoga. How to do karma yoga by which the law of karma can be surmounted. Because what binds you is your desire for the effect. And so long as you desire it, you will get it. That is a law of nature. That's a law of karma. You will get it, for good or bad. But remember, it can be either for the good or for the bad. That's not in your hands. For instance, you can, anything you do, you can do that action, but you can't say 100% that this is what I will get out of it. Even if it's a cup of tea you're going to drink, say. You put it to your lips, and you have made a beautiful cup of tea. You just sat down to drink it, and then the bell rings, and you put it down, or the cat jumps and the whole tea is on the ground. So anything can happen at any time. So the end product is really not in your hands, because it appears to be coming according to your wish 90% of the time. You're fooled into a belief that this is under your control. But that is wrong. It is not under your control. Only thing which is under your control is this moment and how you're doing this action now, the attitude with which you're doing this action now. And that's all you need to do. You're not asked to do anything else. Leave the rest to God. Because you will get your just desserts. Most definitely. There's no question about it. Nature will see to it that you get your just desserts.
Well, and I think it bears repeating what you said, that karma yoga is not going out and doing good, quote unquote, deeds, but rather karma yoga means doing the actions that are in front of you to the best of your abilities, without the attachment to the outcome, which
not only attachment, without even looking at it. Because of course it starts with attachment, but without even hoping for it or thinking about it, because actually it's not in your hands. Mm-hmm. You're just wasting your time worrying about what's going to come out of this action of mine.
Well, and that's where so much
better or worse.
And you see, I can see it both in myself, I can see it in so many others, where so much of the suffering comes of the anticipation that by doing a certain act, I'm going to get this certain outcome. And it's the expectation of the outcome that creates so much suffering for people. Oh, I'm going to be nice to people, so they'll be nice back to me. And then they're not nice back to me, and so I get upset. Or whatever it may be. And it's so much the expectation rather than finding the joy in the act itself.
Exactly. What he says is no anticipation, no expectation, but full participation in the drama of life. That's what he asks for.
Well, I think that can be the really big challenge then, is the full participation in the dramas of life. It's Joseph Campbell, always says, you turn life from a free fall into a dive. You make it a conscious act, a deliberate act into the world, instead of you're still falling through space. There's no bottom, but at least you're choosing to engage it in a certain way.
A conscious choice that I will do the best I can. It doesn't matter if you're vacuuming a room. It doesn't matter at all. The type of job makes no difference whatsoever. This is the greatness of the Gita's philosophy. That's the only way to get out of this clutches of the law of karma. But remember that both for good and bad. It works for both good and bad. You don't care whether the good comes. It may come. It may not come. Even with the best intention in the world, you may get some bad effect out of it, but you don't care anymore. You're just doing your best. That's all you've been asked to do, and that's all you need to do, without caring about whether it's what sort of results I'm going to get. But of course, you must do the best.
Well, and I love and appreciate the idea of just always doing your best, no matter what it is that you're doing. If you're washing the dishes, then you're not doing the dishes to get them done. You're doing them to do a good job doing the dishes.
And you may or may not, if you're a maid in a house, your mistress may praise you or say, it's been very well done. Or she may say that, this has not been well done. That's not your lookout. Your lookout is, have I done my best in this? And that's all that God expects you to do. And that's all. He does not judge you by what sort of effects you have produced, but only by what sort of causes you have done. That is, how have you done that job? That's all.
Well, I can definitely relate as a parent, because we're essentially maids, as it were, and it's not like we get any praise from the children. You can clean the house, you can do the dishes, you can do all that stuff, and you can't exactly expect praise from your children. Like, oh, thanks, Dad, for doing the dishes today. That would be a miraculous act in and of itself. So you kind of have to learn to do things for their own sake and not for the expectation of a particular outcome on the other end.
Reward or any outcome, because it might be a punishment also. You never know. But that's not in your hands in any case, is what he says. That's not in your hand. So just leave it. Stop worrying about the future. Just do this present moment. Do the best you can. Whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter that a very menial job or a negligible job. That doesn't matter. In the eyes of God, your attitude with which you do it is the most important thing.
And so any final words for people listening and hearing this, of just whether it's the way to interact or final understanding that you'd like to leave people with?
Well, the understanding is that you are the makers of your own destiny. So do the best you can at every moment of your life, because that is all that God expects of you. And if you do that, you are automatically evolving. Even if you do not all of us may not be able to do yogic practices or give great amounts in charity or sit and meditate for hours on end. It does not matter. What the Gita says is work is worship. And this includes any sort of work. Whatever work you are doing, do it as an offering to God and leave the outcome to Him. Because anyway, the outcome is with Him. So why are we bothered? Why are we worried about it? Just do the best you can.
Well, just do the best you can is wonderful advice for everyone always. So I think that's
full participation, and joyful participation. That's another important thing. Not, oh my God, I've got to do this now. I suppose I should. Not that. He's a joyful, enthusiastic participation in whatever you are doing.
Vanamali, where can people find out more about your ashram, the work that you do? You've got everything from numerous books on all kinds of different amazing subjects. You have CDs with your music and your singing. You're a wonderful singer. What's the best place for people to connect to you and your teachings?
Yeah, we have a website, www.vanamaliashram.org.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, as always, Mataji, for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate your insights and taking the time to talk with us and connect with us all the way on the other side of the world.
Thank you, because this is a subject very close to my heart. Because I feel that it really it's of such importance to everybody.
And for all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have learned something today. I hope you're willing to joyfully participate in the experience of the world. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a very present moment. Namaste. Hey everybody, it's Ashton here with an announcement. We're starting a weekly contest giveaway over at Savannah Spirit. If you'd like to enter into the contest to win one of our weekly prizes, go to savannahspirit.com/contest. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast today, we'd really appreciate it if you went over to iTunes, left us a review, leave us some comments, and share this podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Also want to invite you to go check out Savannah East, which is the name of our blog and also the name of a Facebook group where I interact with guests and our audience. We'll post recent episodes up there as well as interesting articles relating to our guests and or the topics on the shows. And again, thank you so much for listening. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.